What's up, Meta Nerds? This video is all about the Bantha species. They were 2.5 meters, or just over 8 feet tall, and weighed 4,000 kilograms, a whopping 8,818 pounds, about the weight of 2.5 Honda Civics. All Banthas had a pretty similar color, with tones of whites, browns, and blacks, and they had these deep red eyes. Two of their most distinguishing features was their large, gnarly set of horns, and their wide, droopy mouth. They had two pairs of sharp teeth that pointed outward, and he had this extremely long tongue, which had basically a bunch of tiny nostrils along it, and a gripping hand at the end. The holes in the tongue could pick up smells of potential food sources, and the gripping knob at the end of the tongue helped to rip some of that thick vegetation off its branches or out of the ground. Now, Banthas are found throughout the galaxy because they are highly adaptable to all kinds of different environments. Even though a giant fur-covered elephant might not seem like a good idea in a desert, they had a remarkable ability to regulate their internal temperature, and were able to store food and water for several weeks. This is why some species like the Tuskan Raiders wanted to keep Banthas around, because not only were they intimidating to enemies, but they were very low maintenance, and had the awesome feature of providing blue milk, and of course, if needed, could be killed and eaten. Another thing that made Banthas so great for nomadic people is that their lifespan was between 80 and 100 years. They were able to reproduce once they were 20 years old, so it would be pretty easy for a tribe to grow a herd of Bantha. The males were referred to as bulls, and they looked pretty similar to the females, but just being greater in size. While both genders had horns, the males would grow at a faster rate, with some male Bantha being able to have horns that spiral twice by the time they die, whereas many female Bantha horns will only ever get long enough to curl once. They grow at a rate of 1 knob a year, and so you can approximate how old a Bantha is just by counting the rings. People that work with Bantha are also able to tell a Bantha's health just by looking at the thickness and condition of these horns, perhaps leading to a Tusken Raider folk saying, "Never look a gift Bantha in the horns." And although they could use these to fight off predators, they would also butt heads with each other in combat for dominance, and sadly sometimes these horns would get entangled, and were nearly impossible to untangle, and so unless some other beings came to help it out, the pair of Bantha would pass out on the spot and eventually die from dehydration. These males were fighting with each other so that they had a chance to reproduce with the female, and a Bantha herd, which normally consisted of 25 members, was led by the strongest female. If the herd grew too large, the second strongest female would take some members with her and set off as a separate herd. Something that wasn't very convenient if you were trying to breed Bantha is the fact that the gestation period was about 30 months. That's 2.5 years, a long time to wait if you're trying to set up a Bantha farm. But even newborn Bantha were impressive, weighing 50 kilograms or about 110 pounds. And it was during this gestation period that Banthas started to produce blue milk. This is the byproduct that they're most known for, but also Bantha dung was very important and was often used by Tuskens as cooking fuel and for heating their homes. Because they were located on so many different planets, there were a bunch of different subspecies of Bantha, with some of the strangest being dwarf Bantha, swamp Bantha, and the feral Banthas that were found on the planet Talasia. Banthas were a huge part of Tusken culture, and when a Tusken child turned 7, there was a huge ceremony in which they were presented with their own Bantha, which was the same age of them and meant to be their companion for life. The Tusken would learn how to saddle the Bantha and ride it into the desert so that they could take part in other adult initiation ceremonies. It's said that a spiritual bond would develop between the Tusken and their personal Bantha, and when two Tuskens married, their Banthas would also mate, and it's said that the Tusken's child and the Bantha's offspring were always the same gender. When Banthas died, they were placed in large graveyards, and other Bantha were seen to have a deep emotional response whenever they were to pass through these graveyards. If a Tusken Raider died before its Bantha, which often happened due to this beast's long life expectancy, then the Banthas would often commit suicide by refusing to accept any drink or food. Well, that's it for the Bantha species, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. Children across the galaxy, including Chewbacca's son Lumpawaru, enjoyed playing with stuffed Bantha toys. Han Solo's children in Legends, Jaisa and Jaina Solo, were often read their favorite bedtime story, The Little Lost Bantha Cub. We all know about the cult of the Gonk, but there was also a religious order called Dim Yu, which was based in Mos Eisley and focused on the worship of Bantha. A funny phrase on the planet Agamar was that people would say, "You need to be ready to grease the whole Bantha," meaning that the person had to be totally committed to this task, which might take a long time to finish. And just like we saw at Nerf, Bantha meat was eaten throughout the galaxy, and having an excellent Bantha steak was a staple of 5-star restaurants. And quite disgustingly, a popular soft drink was called Bantha Blood Fizz, which, like the name suggests, is something like carbonated Bantha blood. But it should be pointed out that some people looked at the beast as disgusting. As Mace Windu put it, "Banthas are filthy animals. I do not eat filthy animals." The most famous phrase involving the word Bantha was when people used the insult Bantha fodder, or as it's pronounced in Huttese, Bantha Poodoo. And did you know that in the original version of A New Hope, the Bantha that we saw was actually a trained elephant named Margie? The big fur suit, face, and horns had to be taken on and off in between shots. And it's said that you can actually see a part of Margie's trunk sticking out from underneath the Bantha costume. But re-releases of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy both feature CGI Banthas. And to make the sound of a Bantha, they slowed down a bear's roar. Well, that's it for the Bantha species. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button, and be sure to leave a comment down below if I missed any cool facts, or if you have a suggestion for future videos. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MetaNerdsLore, so you can see us build Star Wars props and cosplays, along with some other cool Star Wars stuff. If you want to help support this channel, check out the description below for our Amazon store and our Patreon. And be sure to subscribe, because we're making videos like this every single day. But more important than all that, remember, don't be Bantha Poodoo, and the Force will be with you. Always.